So, little Nathan, yeah, remember little Nathan? Little Nathan, yay, yeah, remember him? He made a video, yay, little Nathan. Yeah, little Nathan made a video about deconverting from Christianity. Oh, yeah, I know. Woo, yeah, that's the video I made. What do you want me to say? Woo, too bad. Yeah, it's too bad. It's all right. It's interesting. I mean, I accept a lot of the things that you say as legitimate to your experience of, you know, I can't even really call it deconverting because you didn't really convert. You were like a Christian for what, a year? You had like a couple bad experiences. Like, now I'm an atheist. You talk to Pine Creek Doug and you're like, now I'm an atheist. Okay, cool. I mean, I guess you're an agnostic. Who knows? Who knows what you are? You're confused. The confusion was obvious. Now, one of the things, just word to the wise, my friend, I'm sure it did not help when you were in the process of when you were actually depressed. But there's a lot of angst in you. A lot of intellectual angst. You have this 23-year-old young man angst, which is like, I got to answer this now. I got to have answers for this now. You know, do yourself a favor. You don't have to wait till most people grow out of that, and you'll probably grow out of that by the time you're 35. You will be like, what were those big, pressing, important questions that I absolutely needed to answer now? But you can do yourself a favor now and see through yourself and recognize that those big challenging questions that you really need to have answers for isn't a real thing. It's kind of like the 14-year-old you. You know, it was groundbreakingly important. I got to take this girl to dance tonight. Oh my God, I'm going to die. And then now you look back on that and you don't even remember what girl you were freaking out over, what dance, you know. You know what I'm saying? There's some of that going on with you right now, and it didn't help you with Christianity. It did not help your depression at all. It feeds it a lot. There's too much intellectual angst in you. All these groundbreakingly challenging questions that need answers don't really need answers. Take a chill. Take a chill. It's just something I perceive. Take it with a grain of salt. You know, you don't need to answer all these challenging, groundbreaking questions right now. The whole idea that you need to is a young man perception of life. And it's feeding your angst a lot. I hear a lot of angst in you. And I felt it when I streamed with you. Both times. Now, as far as you deconverting from Christianity, most of your observations about the community of fundamentalists that you hang out with, I accept. Most of them are pretty much true. One of the things that I noticed a lot, because I was raised secular, okay? I didn't become a Christian until I was 29. In the town that I grew up in, the people who I knew, my friends from New York, and my friends from the city when I was like 23, 24, nobody was anathema. You never told people how they ought to live their life. That was just not something you do in secular land. It's anathema. You'll be shunned if you're not hanging out with your friends. Go, you really should stop doing that because this would be better for you. Christians do that all the time. Christians do that all the time. It's part and parcel of Christian culture that they reserve themselves the right to tell you how to live your life. And then they put it back on the Bible. It's terrible. It's one of the worst things in Christian culture. And it isn't helpful. My wife even has traces of that. And she'll say, I'm doing it for you. I'm doing it to help you. And I'm like, no, you aren't. You're doing it. Nobody's ever doing that to help you. They're doing that because they get a self-righteous charge out of it. In the best case scenario, because they feel self-righteous and good doing it. In the worst iterations of that, they're doing it to harm you. But that's one of the things that you ran up against. Christians telling you how to live your life, ostensibly because they want to help you get more in line with God. It's never useful. It's never good. And I ran into some of that, I did. I ran into some of that when we first moved out here. We weren't Christian. My wife wasn't a Christian. We were extraordinarily worldly in some ways. And, it was fine. The group of Christians at my church were cool and all, but there was an undercurrent of, you really shouldn't marry that girl. Are they living in sin? That was a big thing. That was a big controversy like a year and a half after we became Christians. It's really time. People thought that they could speak into our life and tell us it was time for us to get married and we really shouldn't be living together. And I was like, God, how on earth is that business of yours? Again, they'll say they meant well. God said, spoken to them. But it's like extraordinarily busybody. Christians do that type of stuff all the time. I found it wildly offensive. Honestly, that's not how you operate in the secular world, especially in New York. You never tell anybody how to live their life in the secular world that I came from, ever. Unless you want to be shunned. Christians do it all the time. Christians felt that they had the right to tell us, it's time for us to get married and These weren't church elders either. If a church elder does it, okay, fine. Maybe that's his job. But just regular church people, how'd they even know? Because they were gossiping, which they shouldn't have been doing. That's how they knew. Secular world, especially nowadays, secular world operates a different moral paradigm than the church. If you're a church person, it's not helpful to be having Christians live up to a standard that you think is the godly standard. Pray for them and let them get there on their own and keep your mouth shut. Keep your mouth shut, because that's very unhelpful. That's only one of the ways that things that he reports that Christians do. There's a lot of things that the Christians do that he reports that they did to him, and he's correct. The point is, those things are not necessarily germane to the proposition God exists, God does not exist. It doesn't logically follow because you hung out with a bunch of douchebag Christians who acted in ways that were inappropriate and not very helpful, and they weren't operating in your best interest. They were being self-righteous hypocrites. Okay, I accept all of that. It has nothing to do with the proposition God exists, God does not exist. Now, let's get to the intellectual side, which you also said. Now, one of the reasons, I've talked about this in my videos, okay? Little Nathan has deconverted. I know, it's sad. We'll get over it. The Ear Biscuits guy's deconverted. I don't even know the guy's Little Nathan's smarter than the Ear Biscuits guy. The stuff he was saying was so dumb I couldn't even fathom it. So dumb. Don't be dumb, Nathan. Okay? There are a couple of things you said which are correct. And I've never said anything other. Yeah, none of the apologetics work as framed. Great. The Kalam cosmological argument doesn't prove anything. There's flaws in it. I've said that a lot. All of the arguments have flaws in it. I've said that a lot. Now, Christians, do you understand why I say this all the time? Some Christians actually try to debate me on this stuff, like, oh no, we should be selling this to them. No, we shouldn't. Because once they recognize there are flaws in it, they will mistake the fact that there are flaws in arguments for God, which is what he's doing. Therefore there's flaws in the arguments to prove God. Okay, therefore there is no God. It doesn't work like that. No, one doesn't logically follow the other. Then it doesn't do us any service to pretend that the arguments are successful as framed. We're creating little, he's become a baby eater now. You created him. You made that baby eater. You're the one saying, no, Kalam is successful. Christians argue with me about this stuff. Not that often, but now if you're a Christian, now you understand why I don't give any of these apologetics the clean bill of health. Why? Because they aren't successful as framed. The best one amongst them is the tag, and I've said that's 70% of the way there. Now, and Nathan, you aren't off the hook. You're not. Also doesn't work like this. There's the arguments for God don't successfully prove God. Therefore, I'm perfectly free to not believe to say that God doesn't exist. It doesn't work like that. Doesn't logically follow. And you're a bright enough person. Let's take the problem of evil. Yeah, it doesn't quite solve the problem of evil, but you have done enough reading and you're pretty well versed in this stuff. So you can take the attributes of God according to classical theism, according to like Thomism, for example, which you probably know better than me. Right? Omnipotent, omniscient, yada, yada, yada. And then ask the question, well, then, therefore, why is there evil in the world? It's not up to me to now convince you of that. You can start thinking about it for yourself. It's not up to a Christian apologist to solve that riddle for you. You're turning into a man and a philosopher and a thinker for yourself. You can start trying to solve that for yourself. So the idea that, therefore, there's no good answer isn't where you end up. And that's kind of where you think you belong. I'm not sure if that was clear how I just said it. In other words, you are a philosopher and a thinker and an individual for yourself. So the idea that there is not a successful apologetic for the existence of God isn't good enough. That's not a good ending place for you. You can start to work on the apologetics for yourself. And there's, Pine Creek, same ditto for you. Ditto for all the intelligent atheists. Ultimately, you're going to be held to that standard of accountability. Because as I've said in my other videos, I can think of a handful of people in the atheist community, let's say Paul Gia, maybe Alex Malpass, maybe Pine Creek, maybe a couple others, who could actually work on successful versions of these arguments. The fact that they put themselves in the camp of these arguments aren't successful as framed, therefore God doesn't exist. Think about what you're actually saying. These arguments aren't successful as framed, therefore God doesn't exist. Doesn't work like that. And ultimately, you need a much higher standard of integrity if you're going to call yourself a real thinker or a real philosopher. These arguments don't work as framed. Good. Work on them and frame them because they can be made successful. That, I promise you, is true, and that is ultimately up to you. Did that make sense? Do you understand what I'm saying? I promise you that they can be made successful, and all the people who I mentioned, it's somewhat incumbent on you to do it. Not just to say, okay, we're smarter than these arguments. These arguments are unsuccessful. Good. You can also think of ways to make them successful. That's my point. So you don't get to just cop out. You don't. Intellectual integrity demands that you start putting your little mind to the grindstone and start thinking of how they can be made successful. That's one of the things that you do, Nathan. And I'm not, if this sounds harsh, I'm not intending to be harsh. Nathan's a good guy. I like Nathan. And I have confidence in him to some degree. I think he's a good person. And I think he's honest. I think he struggles. You're angst-ridden. You know? You're angst-ridden. I got to have all these answers now. That part of your personality is not serving you. Trust me. You know, take it with a grain of salt. You don't know me all that well, but trust me. I hear it in you and it's not serving you. It helped your depression. It helps you be full of angst about things that you need not agonize over. You agonize over a lot of things. I can't be the only person in your life who's noticed this, that you agonize unnecessarily over a lot of things. And I find it kind of sad from my own point of view, because when I became a Christian, I accept that his version of why he became a Christian and what happened to him. But when I became a Christian, I found extraordinarily healing and extraordinarily restorative. For the very reason I was very similar to you in some ways. And I was full of intellectual angst and, you know, drug user, drinker, things like that. That's why you drink and do drugs, people. Reality check. Because you're trying to heal something. You're trying to calm something down. You're trying to calm something down inside of yourself. You're trying to soothe a part of yourself. That's why you reach for the booze. That's why I did. It's why almost everybody does. You're trying to self-medicate to a certain degree. And Christianity starts to heal those questions in a really deep, really meaningful way. So when I became a Christian, 2 or 3 years into my Christian walk, I started to experience real peace of mind. Like, shh, calm down. For the first time in my life, real peace of mind. And it's too bad, Nathan, that you didn't find that in your church, and I accept that the people you knew were hypocritical douchebags. I totally accept that. I'm pretty sure you're painting them correctly. In my experience, there's a bunch of people at church like that. But I find it sad. You know, because my experience with Christianity, my church wasn't perfect, but it was good enough. And the church people at the first church I started attending, Malibu Vineyard, was good enough that there was a lot of deep restorative healing that took place for both me and my wife. You know, we were operators. We were the cool kids. We were slick. Particularly my wife, man. It should blow your mind, the people my wife knew and could freely interact with, still does. But back then, forget it. You know, we were like cynical, drug-addled. She wasn't drug-addled. I was street-smart New Yorkers. But there was a lot of baggage, a lot of emotional walls going into being a normal person in today's world. There's a war out there. There, honest to God, is a war out there in today's world. And if you haven't experienced it yet, you probably live in a small town that's relatively sedate and peaceful. You get to places like New York, you'll experience it firsthand directly, and you'll know it's for real. And church was a respite. Church was sanctuary. Church was healing and restorative in a really deep and meaningful way. Allowed me to connect and experience peace of mind in levels that I had never even come close to in any secular context. There were things I enjoyed as a secular person, sure, still are things now. But it was much deeper and much more significant. So it is too bad. My only point in all of that little diversion is that it was too bad that you couldn't find that at church, Nathan. I think that's too bad. I accept that you couldn't. I don't accept that there isn't church somewhere that could be good and healthy out there in England somewhere. I think you live in Manchester, somewhere around there. You know, Manchester's where the Smiths came from. You didn't know that? Yeah, Smiths. Got a lot of good music scene from Manchester. The whole almost punk rock scene came out of Manchester. There's a lot of like weird. There's a video on. I think it's on Amazon, 24-hour Party People. It's supposed to be really good. I'll check it out one of these next month or so. It's supposed to be really good. It's about the whole Manchester music scene. I think that's where Nathan's from, or somewhere thereabouts. At its best. And I'm not saying that you connected to the right church, and I'm not saying that your experience with church is invalid, because it sounds to me like it was, what you say it was. But my experience with church was very different. The people weren't great, holy Christians, but they were good enough, and they had enough integrity, and they were caring enough that they were able to actually put really deep, deep, deep restorative healing inside of me. Now, I believe that's directly from the Spirit of God himself. Obviously you're an atheist, you don't agree with that. But that was something that I was able to experience in a really deep way. And for the first time in my life, Christianity gave me peace of mind that I could not find in any other source. Any other source, deep peace of mind. So it's too bad that our little angst-ridden friend here, who's still full of angst, that's the only thing I try to point out, Nathan. He's a good guy. He's really knotted up emotionally, really, really fervent in his thought processes. He even talks fast. You talk fast too, Craig? Yeah, shut up. I'm from New York, I'm supposed to talk fast. He's from England. He's from some sleepy old town in England. He's from sleepy, steelworker town or something. He's supposed to talk slow. Talk slow and be mellow. Church is supposed to be restorative. Supposed to be peace-inducing. It's supposed to center you with at least the creator of the cosmos in a way that you walk away from church experiences feeling more at peace and more restored. What he was looking for in church is supposed to be found there. So I find it too bad. He acknowledges that when his first reason why he became a Christian was emotional. And I get it. He was struggling. So war out there in the real world. And if you come from places where you dysfunctional family life, forget it. It's really hard to right yourself. It's really hard to grow yourself up. Especially as a young man, 23, 24 years old. Why? Because most people get that from their family. And if you don't get it from your family, there's only a couple other sources you can get it from, and church is one of them. If your family didn't put it in you, it's really hard. It may be easier for women. I made this up weird. I speculated about this with Shannon, that she came from a healthy family life, and she informed me that I was mistaken. But, it occurs to me that maybe women don't need it as desperately. Because my wife certainly didn't come from a healthy family life. She came from complete and utter chaos, war zone, times 1,000 worse than what he's described. And she's fine. She's fine. Maybe women, maybe it's biological. Maybe women can grow themselves up somehow. But men don't seem to be able to do that. And they need some form of community to teach them, right from wrong, and how to value themselves, and how to stand up straight. And so he responded to Peterson, and he acknowledges that some of what he responded to Peterson. I'm rambling a little bit. Let's see how much time I have. That's part of that is good and healthy. That's the point. Part of what church is trying to teach you, the standard ethical framework from 1950s squarehead ethical framework. Some of it is not that great, but some of it is actually necessary. You get it from your family of origin. If you don't get that growing up, it's really hard to get that, and you need some of it as a young man, because it's really controlling yourself, controlling your animal impulses, keeping a lid on yourself, just not drinking too darn much, and not partying too much, and getting up and going to work on time. It's really hard to regulate yourself as a man. It's really hard. And you need some of that goody two-shoes type of religiosity, that sort of standard issue 50s type moral framework. You need some of that in you in order to be somewhat successful. That's why Peterson kind of took off, because that's what he was talking about. Now, we can debate, a little of that goes a long way, and we can debate how much, but you do need some of that. Or you just ain't gonna work. You gotta get up on time and go to work and think and, function there. So, some of what you were looking for in church, is to be found there. And honestly, it was some of the same reasons why I started becoming interested in religion in my 20s. Not that I necessarily, I remember I said this to somebody. I was getting drunk with a friend of mine at a concert in Purchase. And I remember saying to her, I can't wait to start working full time. She looked at me like I was fucking crazy. She looked like it was totally, what on earth do you mean you can't wait to start working full time? And I knew exactly what I meant. I thought full time was what I thought I needed that structure. I thought I want some peace of mind. I want some steady, dependable peace of mind that doesn't leave and I can count on I want order in my life. I want peace, order, stability. That's what I was starting to crave when I was around 24, 25. Probably the same thing happened to him when he was 20. Church does provide that. The only place I found any meaning, I didn't recognize at the time that jobs don't provide. Jobs are crazy. Full-time jobs don't help because they're insane. Everyone's wired up and aggressive and crazy. You know, full-time jobs don't actually provide you any of that. Church actually can. That's my point. Church life actually can. At its best, it can give you enough stability, enough grounding, enough peace of mind, enough, you know, it depends on the people who make up the congregation. If they're hypocritical douchebag phonies, forget it. Then it doesn't really work. Why? Because you got to watch your back all the time with the gossipy, two-faced, you know, church people. Then it doesn't work. But at its best, church can actually provide that. It can give real stability, sanctuary, emotional healing from a world that has gone mad. And I immediately recognized that it was available in my church when I first started going to church, and it was available for real. And it was deeply restorative and deeply helpful. So it's too bad that he couldn't find it at the church that he was. But, you know, I still sense that he wants it. That's my point. I still sense that he's looking for that structure, that this is what I'm supposed to do with my time, and this is how I fill my time. He's still got some of that, you know, inside of him. So there you have it. Those are just my observations about his video. So that is all for now, kids. Just some observations. That's all. You know, that's all for now, kids. Mass ended. Go in peace. Amen.